Welcome back to another edition of Maryland Family Matters. My name is Jeff Trimbath, and I have the privilege of leading the Maryland Family Institute. And it is my great privilege to welcome to the podcast today Dr. Matt Spalding. Uh, Dr. Spalding is many things. He's a husband, a father. He is a Washington scholar, college professor, head of the Hillsdale College, DC campus, and a longtime friend. We've worked together for many, many years, Dr. Spalding. Welcome to Maryland Family Matters.
Oh, it's great to be with you, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
Well, I want to have you on today because we are in the 250th
Yes.
anniversary of our founding, and you have some very unique and important things to say about that important birthday. But before we get to that, I wanted to ask you just a little bit about your personal life. How did you get to the DMV area? How did you get to this course of study? Tell us a little bit about your
Yeah.
background, maybe your family.
Well, just I guess quickly, because it actually connects to this book and this anniversary in particular. I grew up in Central California. My dad was a doctor in a farming area. Nothing, really nothing there in the middle of nowhere. I was in middle school in 1976, and I distinctly remember watching the tall ships and going to a parade, and the Freedom Train came through the valley, and all of those things were significant to a young boy in the middle of in farm country. I went to school in Southern California, a place called Claremont Men's College at the time, now McKenna College, and I was there and studying in college and then graduate school during the build up and the bicentennial of the Constitution. It just so happens that I had some great professors of American history and constitutional and political thought. So that really shaped my intellectual background. I then came out to DC. My wife is actually born in the District of Columbia, so she's
Yeah,
actually a local.
yeah.
We now live in Northern Virginia, and I've been involved in kind of political debates and pursuing my public works on the founding for some time. Ran a Center of Constitutional Studies at the Heritage Foundation for a long time, where I published several books on the Constitution in particular. And about 15 or so years ago, Hillsdale College wanted to build a campus in D.C. My wife's a Hillsdale graduate, and so convinced me to come over and do that, where I continue my scholarship. We have a graduate school in Washington, D.C. And approaching this particular anniversary, given that past, given my own personal past, I wanted to write a book specifically on or for this anniversary of 2026. And since I've been teaching about these ideas for a long time, studying this graduate school, and now teaching at the graduate school for Hillsdale, I wanted to focus in on this particular subject of the Declaration, which I think is really the heart of America, but also the heart of what makes America great, why we celebrate it. And I wanted to contribute to that discussion in a very serious way, a commentary on how to understand that document, which we hear the famous parts every once in a while, and we recite certain parts even. But we really don't know much about it. It's actually quite rich, beautiful document that I wanted to us to recall at this time.
Well, let's go ahead and dig in to the book, and I've got my copy here, "The Making of the American Mind: The Story of Our Declaration of Independence," just out a few, I guess, weeks ago, and I just got my copy a few days ago. I want to dig in and just talk with you about the book. Why did you write the book, and what do you hope readers will come away after they've read it?
Well, I mean, the title of the book, "The Making of the American Mind," comes from a letter that Jefferson wrote later, in which he's asked about writing the Declaration. He says it was meant to be an expression of the American mind.
Hmm.
He says, I didn't invent this stuff. I didn't make it up. It didn't like leap out of my skull from nowhere. He was trying to capture something, and this concept of the American mind. And there definitely was an American mind in 1776.
Hmm.
So part of it was I wanted to tell the history of that. So the book gets a lot into history, especially British history, colonial history, the wars of the English revolutions, but also traces back to Greek and Roman thought and the Christian history, the whole Christian tradition that shapes all these things shape this American mind. And then in particular, the debate in the, say, for the 10 years leading up to 1776, which were really the defining factor, the debate in the Continental Congress. And then beyond that, I wanted the Declaration to tell its own story. It actually is it's quite an amazing document. It's extremely well written, drafted by Jefferson, but then edited by a committee and edited by the Continental Congress. So it's unusual in the sense that it's a corporate document. It's made by a legislature, the Continental Congress, and it's actually a law. It was passed by the Continental Congress, but it's still, if you open up the U.S. Code, the organic laws, as they're called, the first organic law, so the first thing in the United States Code of Law is the Declaration of Independence.
Huh.
So it's still an important document in that sense. And I wanted to capture that as much as possible. And then in doing so, capture that history. I wanted to capture or get us to think again about the underlying deeper truths. The founders' world was different from our modern world. The world of the founders proclaimed self-evident truths.
Hmm.
It thought differently. It's a different world in that sense that I think is a great antidote to our kind of modern poison of subjectivism and
Hmm.
whatnot. That recalling that and engaging in that conversation is actually quite good for the American mind today.
You mentioned both in your comments there and then also extensively in the book the theological underpinning of the Declaration. And as a Christian organization, I'd love for us to talk a little bit about that. We don't oftentimes think about that theological grounding, but tell us a little bit about what you wrote about, what you discovered as you wrote the book about the theological grounding of the Declaration.
Yeah, no. Well, so part of that, I do emphasize theological ground quite a bit, but just as a little bit of a background
Yeah.
to that. Um, so the Declaration of Independence is usually taught that it was kind of the invention of Thomas Jefferson. This is really his mind at work, and it's all Lockean. And so part of like really kind of going through the process how it was created, but also then talking about the deeper history. There are influences coming from much older works prior to John Locke. John Locke was important, but not necessarily decisive, at least in the
Hmm.
philosophical sense.
Hmm.
And so I wanted to highlight all of that. But then, one thing I wanted to bring out more, which I think is a very, very powerful, and also we kind of missed the forest for the trees, is the Christian influence. And there I would juxtapose two other positions to clarify for us.
Yeah.
The Declaration is oftentimes, if not usually, taught as, well, it's deistic. There's no religious connotation at all.
Yeah.
This is merely Jefferson talking about rationalism.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think that's just not supported at all by the evidence.
Hmm.
Both of the signers, many of whom, a few had odd opinions. Jefferson, including himself, had odd opinions about Christianity. Franklin, maybe there was maybe one or two others, but everyone else was really a mainstream, overwhelmingly Protestant. There was one Catholic signer,
Yep.
and
From
they
Maryland.
were
From Maryland, we'll say. Yeah.
from Maryland. Yes, Charles Carroll.
Yep.
But they were all mainstream, which in 1776 meant pretty darn conservative, biblical Christians.
Yep.
So from a signer's point of view, they weren't a bunch of deists. But on the other hand, it's also clear that the Declaration does not speak in specific doctrinal language. It doesn't make a
Right.
reference to Christ in particular. It's not there's not a statement of faith in a religious sense. So what is it? So I was kind of wanted to kind of recapture that or try to let it tell its own argument in general. And I think there are two things that become very clear. One is the history going into the Declaration. I had mentioned that the founders were very much influenced by their own history, which was English history.
Hmm.
And one thing they wanted to avoid were the English Civil Wars, which were political between king and parliament. But overwhelmingly, they were also religious
Yeah.
between Protestants and Catholics, and then within Protestant churches,
Yep.
between Anglicans and Puritans and all of these kinds of things. Well, they wanted to avoid all of that. So that's one reason why they wanted to avoid specific doctrinal language.
Mhm.
Because they wanted to not have those fights, which could also lead to bloodshed.
Yeah.
On the other hand, they did not want to abandon. There's plenty of evidence. They didn't want to. Even Jefferson did not want to abandon the the foothold, the foundation, the mooring supplied by the Christian tradition. That's clear. It's
Hmm.
clear through all their writings, all their letters, and it's clear in the Declaration.
Hmm.
So if you look at the Declaration, there are 5 references, uh, perhaps even more if we think of broader references as well. But 5 times distinctly that God comes up in the Declaration. And what's interesting about those references is that they begin generally, and by the end of the document, become very personal.
Hmm.
So the first reference, the one that's oftentimes pointed to by the deists as evidence of nefarious influences, is a reference to the laws of nature and of nature's God.
Yep.
Ah,
Yep.
that's not God. That's nature. It's some sort of pantheistic rationalism,
Yep.
which is nonsense. The laws of nature, we can think in rational terms, the Greeks and the Romans, but there's also a Christian natural law tradition.
Yep.
But then the laws of nature's God, another way of putting that, put it in biblical terms, is general revelation. It's not
Mhm.
specific, it's not special revelations, but general revelation, what we see around us, God's creation. Okay, but then we learned after that, all men are created equal. Huh.
Hmm.
So they're not made by government, they don't evolve, they don't merely come out of the mud. They're created. So there's a creator. And then in a short document, they repeat themselves, which tells us something is important here. All men are created, and they're endowed by their creator with
Hmm.
unalienable rights. I mean,
Hmm.
let's not take those words for granted. There's a setup there, right? There's a created order. Generally, there's a universe of it's the laws of nature's God.
Yeah.
Then there's man in particular. It's created by God, and then man has a particular endowment, or we
Hmm.
might say is created in the image and likeness of God.
Yes. Yes.
Well, then you move beyond that, and towards the end of the document, it turns out this same God not only created man and endowed him with particular rights, but is the supreme judge of the world and
Hmm.
looks at us and judges the rectitude of our intentions, which is to say that this God sees inside our heart and can see our intentions.
To
Uh,
use the language of the prayer book, from you no secrets are hid.
that's
Right.
right. And so
Yeah.
this is, and then the last, and then again, the next reference is to divine providence, a firm
Hmm.
reliance on divine providence. And divine providence means a God who sometimes intervenes in the affairs of men,
Hmm.
providential. Washington famously thought that God intervened a lot in the American Revolution.
Hmm.
Um, and then the last words refer to sacred honor,
Hmm.
an honor which is somehow sacred. So you put all these things together, and it starts off very generally what we can know by through our minds or our reason. Okay, but then there's a creator who endows man, who judges man's hearts, and sometimes intervenes in man's affairs. That does not strike me as the God of secular rationalism.
That's great.
Which is why I settle on the language that, yes, it's not biblical per se, it's not Christian specifically at all. We can overread it by saying this is a quote unquote Christian nation. That goes too far, but
Hmm.
it's clearly not deism. It's not merely rationalism. But there's a theology, and there's a substantive theology that I think we would be wrong to miss. Indeed, I think you can't read the Declaration without it.
Yeah.
So I think that's an extremely important theme that has largely been um, not completely overlooked, but oftentimes set aside when we think of the Declaration as a beautiful, important political document. It's also actually a quite important theological document.
I love, Matt, how you walked us through that funnel, if you will, from the
Yeah,
general to the specific and the personal. And it just strikes me as a wonderful corrective that so many of us have been taught. Myself, my wife, we're products of the public school system, and none of this was really taught in our education growing up. We were instead taught, like you said, that this is a project of enlightenment rationalism, and the reason it doesn't refer to sectarian doctrines is because they didn't really believe this stuff, and
that's right. No,
but
that's That's exactly right, right? And even in the best of circumstances, you were taught that, the Declaration just has nothing to do with that. That's not.
That's
It's a
right.
political document.
Yeah, yeah,
And the beauty of the Declaration is that you can read it and understand it as a document of reason and revelation. Indeed, it
yeah,
intertwines both of them. And even Jefferson understood that and meant it, I think, in that sense, which is that there are, if you think of the very long stretches of Western civilization, what are our sources of knowledge, of fundamental knowledge? Well, one is the rational tradition going back to the Greeks and the Romans,
yep, yep,
which has a relationship with the Christian tradition, especially in the medieval and then the Western tradition. So that's one source of knowledge, man's reason. What's the other great source of knowledge? Revelation.
mhm,
This is not special, revelation in its completeness. This is a political document, but it clearly outlines a sense of general revelation that points beyond itself.
yeah, yeah,
That's quite important that I think you can't ignore. You can't miss the book. I don't know if you noticed this, Jeff, but there's kind of a one of the early, I think it's in the first chapter. The quote at the beginning of the chapter is from C.S.
yeah.
Lewis. There's a
Yes,
block,
I did see that. Yep.
and I was like, well, why is that there? What does that have to do with the Declaration of Faith? I've always been a great C.S. Lewis fan, but I was struck. He writes an autobiography called "Surprised by Joy,"
Yes.
which is
Yep.
about ultimately about his conversion. But uh, think more generally for a moment. And he actually talks this way in his book. He was originally a scholar of pagan mythology, which say he was, studying this kind of pseudo history, mythological history of great noble deeds and heroic men and this kind of thing. And he makes the observation there that sometimes when you're studying these great things, and so for instance here, think of history or think of a political document like the Declaration. Sometimes when you're reading something that is not itself theological in a religious sense, you are then nevertheless struck by something that points you towards, and perhaps even gives you a glimpse of the eternal.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's actually exactly what C.S. Lewis meant by saying he was surprised by joy.
Mm,
So
mm,
the point is, the Declaration is not itself a religious document. It's not the fullness of faith. It was not intended to be, but it's the beginnings, if you will.
yeah. Yeah.
And it's something that there's enough there, and it's clearly there, and it's clearly intentionally there, right? The Reverend Witherspoon, the Presbyterian preacher, was their chaplain of the convention or the Continental Congress. He's the one that likely put the reference in at the end to divine providence because he had given a
Mm,
speech on that a
mm,
few weeks beforehand. Uh, they meant something by these things. And so they're glimpses, they're points, they're references, and they push us to not only transcend ourselves, which is what the laws of nature and nature's God are self-evident truths, and these things do generally, right? Pulls you out of your immediate circumstances, but it does give us glimpses of the eternal. And I think that's the beauty of the document, and it's the extent to which it's still a live document, still an exciting document, still a powerful document, is precisely because it speaks to things that are not merely 18th century. It speaks to these permanent things.
The book is The Making of the American Mind, the story of our Declaration of Independence by Dr. Matt Spalding. Dr. Spalding, with your permission, we'll go ahead and continue this conversation. I think we'll
Sure.
be able to talk in a second edition here of Maryland Family Matters. But we're so grateful for your scholarship on this, and look forward to talking more about this when we come together again next week.
Great. Thank you.